So the first thing is metric versus standard. On your table in front of you, I wiped off and put down a tape measure and 2 wrenches. I tried to get those wrenches to be fairly similar. If you'll notice, there are 2 different ways the measurements are marked on them. Let's look at them real quick. The first one, we'll say something like, I don't know, 11 or 14 or 7 or, you know, anywhere from 4. The ones I gave you are anywhere from 4 to 15, I think. And then we've got the other side. If you look at them, those are written in what? How was that measurement taken on the standard side?
Fractions.
Yeah, they're written in fractions, right? So we started with anywhere from, I think I've got 3/8 is my lowest, up to 3/4, I think. I tried to give each of you one that was similar. Right? So if you take your 2 wrenches and you look at them, they're about the same size. About. Okay, they're not, but they're about the same size. So what's on one was like this one here is a 14.5 inch. Okay, so knowing what each one is very important and how to identify it. On our tools test, I give you a couple of different examples of, hey, what is this wrench? Describe this wrench to me, right? Real quick, we'll go over this tool right here. There's a combination box end, open end wrench. You see it's got a box end where it goes all the way around the nut. And then this side over here is our open end, right? This is for getting in spaces where you can't get all the way around it. Maybe there's a loop and there's a nut inside the loop or something, you can't get to it. This guy here is a lot better for not slipping off, right? You put it around the end of the nut and you can turn it because these guys here can spread if you got a bunch of torque on it, right? So this guy's a little bit better for not rounding off your nuts. And then this one right here is better for if you're trying to get into a tight space or you only have a limited range of movement, right? You can get it here. So, but being able to identify which is which. How do you know if a bolt or a nut is standard or metric? Does anybody remember? It has to do with the threads. That's right. Our thread pitch or our thread count, right? Thread pitch is for our metrics. That's going to determine the amount of millimeters in between each thread. Or we've got, that's our thread pitch. Our thread count is how many threads per inch, right? If you look at a wrench, what it says 11. If you have an 11 on a standard, what would that mean? An 11-inch wrench, right? It's meant in inches. So 11-inch wrench, like this, right? Almost a foot, 12 inches. So that would be, obviously, if you hold up something that's an 11, well, that's not an 11-inch. It's going to be 11 millimeter, okay? All of our metrics are done in millimeter, okay? And on our standards, they're all written in inch. So it'll have this little hash mark, these little quotation mark things on here. That means, so this means an inch. And then this guy up here, this mm, means millimeter. All right. So now the other thing is pull out the tape measures on your bench and stretch them out and then lock it in place. This one here is a combination. So if you look at it on the top, there's going to, if you look at it where the numbers are right side up, on the top is going to be all your inches, right? It says 25 feet up there in red on the very end. So that'll be all inches and feet. On the bottom, it's going to be all of our metric measurements. Okay, this is done in it's 7.5 meters. So 7.5 meters is roughly the same as 25 feet. Okay. So on here, you can see all the numbers are quite a bit smaller. You can see that you can get a more, precise measurement with your metric on this. Now, there's a big debate about why we use standard and why we use metric, right? Mostly it's because of where you live, right? All of our European neighbors and friends are going to be mostly metric, and we're going to be standard imperial. But two, there's some people think you can get a little bit closer or a little bit more detailed if you get down to the fractions of an inch. Is that true? Not necessarily. I mean, you can always keep breaking stuff down, and you can, micro measure stuff. So there really isn't a whole lot of difference. That means when you go out and work on your car, and you say you buy a Ford, I want to buy an American-made car, right? Those companies, Ford and Chevy, they pay a little more taxes because their companies are based here. But they, at the same time, they still use all parts from overseas, right? All of our gears and pistons and all that stuff, they're all made machined overseas. So when you go to work on your car, guess what? If it's an American car, a Ford, Dodge, Chevy, you're going to have 2 sets of wrenches, right? Half the parts, the lug nuts on your car are going to be standard, and the engine components and all those parts and the inside, the dash and stuff are all going to be metric. So really all we did was make the mechanic buy a ton more tools. If I told you that I need a 4.5 hex key, am I asking you for a metric or a standard hex key? Metric, right? 4.5. I don't have to say millimeter after it. 4.5. If I asked you for a 4.5 inch, well, first of all, it wouldn't be in 0.5. It'd be 4.5, But that'd be this big, right? They're 4.5 inches. So I asked the question earlier, how do you know what size a bolt is, right? Is a bolt determined by the size of the head on it, or is it determined by the diameter of the bolt itself? Yeah, the diameter of the bolt itself, right? So that means if I ask you for a 1/2 inch bolt, right? And we had this class, if anybody has any questions on it, you can go back and look at it. But we had this class earlier, but that a 1/2 inch bolt is a 1/2 inch diameter stud that comes out of it. Well, what size is the head of that guy? Well, this is where we're going to go through, and for the most part, you're going to be trial and error starting out, right? Mostly, I think it's a size and a half over, so it depends on really the make and what grade the bolt is, because it can be a little bit. If it's a 1/2 inch bolt, you have a 9/16 inch head, but at the same time, it could be a 3/4 inch head, depending on what you're using it for. All right, so you're going to you can take a tape measure top of the head, and that tells you what size wrench you need, but not what size the bolt is, right? I'm going to have these guys on the test. They're both yellow. They both kind of look the same. One's got the speed piece on the bottom down here where it's, let me pull it up against the board, you can see. Oh, can't see still. Anyway, they're a little notched groove on the bottom. But how do I know if these are standard or metric? Well, one says metric on it, right? It's on the actual thing, but if it's covered up, look at the numbers on it. This guy says 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 5, 11, right? Or 10, 8. Those are going to be in millimeters, right? Hold on, let me. Aha. All right. And then the other side here, this is written in fractions of an inch, right? This guy here is just a little bit different. Everybody see it? I don't want to walk up on you too close. Let me hold it up to the camera here. Ooh, look at how nice. Can't really see it. Let's try the focus button. Kind of worked. All right. But the difference is one is in, remember, one again is in fractions of an inch. That's our standard. And metric is in just millimeter numbers, right? All right, whole numbers. I gave you guys 2 wrenches that are similar. Are they interchangeable? The answer is sometimes, right? So, sometimes they are. Let's look at, if you look at your tape measure, you'll be able to find 2 or 3 that are the same. So take the 2 tools I gave you, and you can line them up. I've got a 14.5 inch. If I take my 14 and you put it on on the tape measure, right? It'll go. It should be 1.4, right? It's measuring the inside gap is going to be your millimeter measure, right? If I take the standard tool that I gave you and you put it up on top and you can measure in how much this guy is, 1/2 inch, should measure up right to a 1/2 inch, right? Is everybody kind of seeing that? Negative. What are you looking at? Which one?
What do we measure? Inside the box?
Yeah, inside of the box. Well, inside of the open end. Rashawn, grab your wrench. Put it on there. Let's try it. All right. So take your wrench, the metric one, line it up to the metric side. Mine's a 14, so I should have a 1 plus 4 more little hash marks, right? Because it's in centimeter on your tape measure, right? Everybody get it? And then you go to your standard. So we'll take the half inch and my half inch, and I'll put it on here. Yep, measures up the inside of the opening is a half inch. See how they're measured now? Right, super easy. I mean, it's kind of common sense, but I wanted to show you a little bit of what it looks like. So let me do it for our camera here, our friends on camera. So you here, all I'm doing is I'm taking my wrench and I'm looking at it. What is the opening inside of the open end wrench to see what the measurement would be.